Hello, my name is Melanie Burdick, and this is my 699 research project for Morningside College. The title is The Effects of Using a Class-Wide Fluency Program with a Computer-Based Fluency Program on the CBM Math Assessment of 4th Grade Students. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 59% of students scored in the areas of basic and below level, and only 9% of students scored in the above level range. These percentages are not a great outlook for career fields requiring more challenging math concepts. Students who have a harder time with basic math concepts have a more challenging time finding jobs and careers. This means that almost 60% of the kids that are in our classroom will have trouble finding a career due to their lack of basic math understandings. This struggle will lead to many more mental health issues and poverty within our students. My why. Much of our recent learning has been around fluency in the area of literacy, and I wanted to continue learning more about how I could implement strategies and make a huge shift in the understanding of math. I wanted to understand what effects different fluency programs had and how they were going to impact the CBM math automaticity. Most importantly, in my research, repeatedly they stated that students who become confident with automatic in fact fluency basic skills are able to successfully engage in more challenging tasks and activities. The first study that I looked at was called Cover, Copy, Compare, and Taped Problems. It was a comparison study, and both interventions increased student achievement, and they both allowed for student practice and were student-led. Taped problems used a form of auditory practice appealing to the different learning styles that students have. While both interventions were determined successful, they used them in isolation, and the research was trying to determine whether two interventions used in combination would provide better results. The next two studies that I looked at were about rocket math. The first study determined that rocket math had potential to be successful intervention. However, the research only examined one math group of kids that were determined at risk. Research was also limited because they had a small population size, but also only one instructor participating. The second study determined rocket math was effective and was a useful intervention. Many students showed growth in fluency and automaticity. The research also failed to provide a baseline for the facts that the students knew prior to the intervention. Again, while these interventions were both determined successful, they failed to determine whether two interventions used in combination would be more successful on assessments. The next strategy that I researched was detect, practice, and repair, or DPR. This was an effective intervention because of the increase of scores on the DCM. The research only examined third grade students, and so it really had a small population size. The last intervention that I researched was the use of computer-based interventions. This intervention was determined to be effective with students who were categorized at risk due to consistently lower scores on the assessments. The research failed to determine the effects this had on their students' progress with more challenging concepts. Again, all of these interventions, while determined to be successful, did not outline what the research was trying to determine, if the use of two interventions together would provide better outlooks and achievement on CBM assessments. So that is why there is a lack from this research. During research, I noticed that there were two main or essential components of math fluency. One is accuracy, and accuracy is the amount of facts a student scores correctly, and automaticity is how quickly the student was able to recall or answer the fact presented. I chose two theories for this research. Sociocultural theory states that students learn from one another when they are grouped with a higher achieving student. The idea was that the lower student would gain knowledge and practice from the higher student and would mirror their achievement to the best of their ability. The next theory that I researched was information processing theory. And it states that the brain stores information much like a computer, and the most important and most used information gets stored for long-term memory, thus freeing up room for more challenging tasks, learning experiences, and activities. While other interventions found success with one intervention, this research aimed to determine the effect of using two interventions together and the effect it would have on student achievement with the CBM Math Automaticity Assessment. I chose to use the computer-based intervention called Extra Math. It is an online program and it is student-led. There is a computer teacher on there, but for the most part, students take this on their own for 10 minutes a day. The next in combination, I chose to use a teacher-led class-wide fluency intervention with partner practice and peer coaching. It was predicted that students who receive teacher-led intervention as well as the computer-based intervention would achieve higher on the CBM Math Automaticity. The independent variable of my study is the teacher-led class-wide fluency intervention with the combination of extra math computer-based intervention. My dependent variable was the results on the CBM Math Automaticity Assessment. The result of this research could be used to determine if adding additional math fluency interventions to existing computer-based interventions has value for students. So there was a total of 36 fourth graders from general ed classrooms for this quasi-experimental design research. No incentive was given to participate. In the experimental group, it consists of 18 students varying races and ethnicities, 3 special education students, and 2 math IEPs, and they were all low SES. The control group was pretty much identical. They had 18 students, varying races and ethnicities, 3 special education students, 2 math IEPs, and again, low SES. Both groups were super similar and similar in demographics, and this ended up resulting in a very similar grouping. The materials used in this research was the class-wide fluency intervention folders that held student graphs, partner conversation cards, sprints, and strategy cards. The next was the FAST CBMR computer system, and this was used for the CBM automaticity assessment. The next was an extra math intervention, which was an online program that is free to everyone. And all students were also equipped with their own computer for the entire study and to complete their intervention and also their assessment. Okay, so the procedure was that the first week was used to collect baseline and allow students to take the CBM Math Automaticity Assessment. We went over procedures and practice routines so that we were ready for the schedule to begin. The teacher-led intervention was 5 times a week for about 15 minutes, and both classrooms, the control classroom and the experimental classroom, got 5 times a week 10-minute sessions of extra math. The 15-minute sessions with the teacher-led class-wide intervention always began with partner practice for 1 minute, then a 1-minute sprint. New strategy was given by the instructor, and the strategy was practiced, and you ended with the final sprint and peer coaching. Students would then graph their progress. This was a quasi-experimental design, and data was analyzed to determine if the effect of combining a teacher-led fluency intervention with a computer-based fluency intervention on CBM math automaticity assessment was effective. 2 sample t-tests were used to compare the pre-assessment data prior to the interventions. Another independent sample t-test was then given to assess the data after the assessment. The independent sample t-test prior to the intervention showed there were no statistical differences between the 2 groups. This was a good starting point for the research, and it meant that both groups were very similar in regard to math fluency. The independent sample t-test for post-intervention did not show a statistical difference as well between the control group and the experimental group receiving the extra intervention. And so basically it's stating that there was no statistical difference in the 2 groups, meaning that the intervention did not hold up to the hypothesis. So when looking at the data of both groups on the post-assessment, the control group did, however, score average of 15 points higher than the experimental group. So again, these results do not confirm the hypothesis that students using both the computer-based intervention and the teacher-led intervention would achieve higher on the CBM math automaticity. Here is another diagram or table to show the difference between the fall and the spring. And the dark gray is group 1, and the light gray is group 2, which is the experimental group. And here it shows the difference in average score. Students need to participate in a consistent fluency intervention, especially with more challenging math concepts becoming the future of many industries. Students need to free up space and practice more challenging skills so that they are prepared to work in a more challenging environment. This is also key to the success of mental health for students as well. Implications for teachers. So teachers need to make sure that they're encouraging and supporting their students in fact fluency. Students who are feeling less anxiety about math and are less likely to have negative feelings about math and pursue it as a future career. Teachers also need to be monitoring students' progress, whether this be through online practice or even just graphing student progress, so that teachers know the right step to take for their fluency. Okay, there was 5 limitations to the study. The first limitation to the study was that the research failed to provide the same intervention proctor for both groups. There was a different one for each group. The second was that the research adapted a program to fit a pre-created program to fit what the researcher needed, and it is the recommendation that the future researchers create a program to fit their needs. Third, the sample size was too small. Research should include a larger number of students to determine whether the intervention was actually not effective or effective. The fourth was that research did not consider outside factors, so it would be the recommendation of researchers to look at socioeconomic status, parental involvement, and homelessness. Finally, the additional grades. So research did not consider different grade levels during this, and it would be recommended to go ahead and expand the research to see who it would impact the most. This has been my $6.99 presentation for Morningside College. Thank you for watching.